Hey, gang, my name is Carl White. I'm going to be your co-pilot today here on the Author Showcase. This is the Scotsman Guide podcast where we do a showcase on the authors. And on this episode, we're doing from the commercial side of the magazine. They have two sides, residential, commercial. And so this was an article from Erica LaCentra, who's the chief marketing officer over at RCN Capital. And the name of the article was A Promising View. So I have to tell you, Erica, I found this very, very interesting, and it was a promising view. So first of all, thanks so much for coming on the podcast. It's great to see you here today.
Thank you so much for having me, Carl.
So give us a movie trailer of what the article is about, and then we'll go into a deeper dive. So give me like a 30-second minute of what the article is primarily about.
Absolutely. So I think in a time where especially mortgage brokers are facing turbulence in terms of the residential space, we wanted to focus on the opportunities that exist within the investment space, particularly fix and flip investments, and how brokers can really hedge their business by trying to add more unique programs to their offerings.
What do you think? What do you think some of the challenges currently facing commercial mortgage originators in the real estate market?
I mean, there's so many challenges. I mean, rates are obviously a big one right now, which are, affecting pretty much every space of the real estate industry right now. Inventory levels are particularly low, and that continues to be the case, unfortunately. So I think just those things combined have caused a lot of issues for mortgage brokers, and really focusing on having a diversity of products is one way that we've seen brokers that we work continue to have success.
So in the article, you talk quite a bit about the fix and flip type strategy. How has the fix and flip market evolved here in the past couple years? You mentioned a little bit about the economic impact of the pandemic and the recovery from it. So how has the fix and flip market maybe evolved for somebody that hasn't been involved with that in the last few years? How is it different?
I mean, the fix and flip market has changed pretty significantly, especially since the pandemic. Obviously, following the housing crash of 2008, flipping became much more popular because of that ability to get inventory very cheap, and continued those trends pretty much up until the pandemic. When the pandemic hit, there was definitely a slowdown in flipping activity, but once things started to stabilize, and especially with rates at the low level they were at during the pandemic, flipping was particularly popular. Yeah. As rates continue to go up, there has definitely been a decrease in flipping activity. But especially in cases where we're seeing low inventory levels, we're finding that investors are getting extremely creative and just being very smart about the deals they're doing with fix and flips, and that's proving to be advantageous for them. So there's still flipping opportunities. They're not as great as they were pre-pandemic and then a few years after the pandemic, but we're starting to see flip activity continuing to trend up again, especially for investors that are very savvy in that space.
What you talked a little bit about how it's still a very lucrative thing to do, but there were some challenges onto it. Could dive a little deeper into the causes behind some of the drop in profit margins for the fix and flip investments here in 2023?
So, I mean, particularly in 2023, I mean, rates continue to be an issue with profit margins and just being able to find that right deal on a home. Obviously, home prices have increased pretty substantially, as have labor costs, as material costs. So all of that kind of adds up, where, if you have an investor that's not necessarily very savvy in the space or doesn't really understand the economics of that particular deal, it can be margins so thin where making a an improper estimate on renovation costs can mean the difference between making money and not making money. Like I said, it really just comes down to housing prices, rates, holding costs, insurance, all of those things that have gone up over the past year or so, which make it that much more challenging. And investors just really need to be conscious that the numbers they're projecting are accurate.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and you also mentioned in the article that I think you said it was something like the home values were down in half of the country's 50 largest metro areas. Boy, that's got to have an impact on the on the housing market and the flip and fix and flip activities. How has it affected that?
So definitely in some of those markets where we saw extreme price appreciation over the past couple of years for investors that were, maybe hit the market wrong, that definitely has had a tremendous impact on flipping activity. However, as we're seeing home price decreases in some of those areas where, again, inventory was particularly low, that could pose an opportunity if people are able to find the right deal. So I think that poses probably the greatest opportunity for fix and flip investors is if they're able to identify some of those markets where demand continues to be high, but prices are starting to go down. There might be older homes that could benefit from being renovated. Those are probably going to be the opportunities that people are going to look for, while some of those hotter markets where prices continue to appreciate might not be the best opportunity for fix and flip, just because like I said, with home prices increasing, but also the price of renovations, materials, etc., it's going to be very challenging to be able to make money in some of those areas. So, like I said, it's very strategic what people need to do these days to make money in this space.
So, what are there? So, obviously, there's some areas better than others. Can we list some of those areas, like where some good areas would be, and maybe others might not be a good time to look at right now?
Yeah, absolutely. So I know that the Sun Belt was one of the areas that was identified as being particularly advantageous for fix and flip investors. Also, just one of the things that was interesting that I identified while writing this was that fix and flip investments are particularly attractive to first-time home buyers. So in areas where there is that demand by first-time home buyers, definitely an area of opportunity specifically for brokers to be able to identify and potentially not only find that fix and flip investor, but also be able to participate in the sale to that ultimate first-time home buyer as well.
Kind of you get a double tap there.
Yeah, which is quite nice.
Yeah. 2 for 1 is always good. And something else I found interesting in the piece that you wrote is how there's an ever increasing FHA backed loans for the flipped homes. I remember when I first got in the mortgage business, it's been quite some time ago, that FHA kind of shied away from the flipped homes, and now it's more of an embracement. How can mortgage brokers effectively tap into that trend?
Yeah, and I think, like I said, that kind of goes into being able to identify areas of the market where there is an increased desire for first-time home buyer activity, and really having kind of that combination of products. One, being able to tap into the investor market, so you have those connections, while also being able to tap into that first-time home buyers, utilizing that FHA financing to ultimately purchase that flip property. Like I said, especially with inventory being so low, those newly renovated properties are particularly appealing to first-time home buyers. It's probably as good as getting maybe even a new construction property, while being a lesser cost. At least it's updated, it's renovated. It won't have the issues being a first-time home buyer, going in and having to deal with a home from the 70s or what you aren't necessarily prepared for. So I think that's especially why it's so appealing to that particular group, and as a broker being able to play every end of the deal, and being connected with those sellers as well as purchasers is going to be most advantageous for them.
I think sometimes it's a misconception that a lot of these houses that are bought to be flipped are paid with cash. And in the article, it mentioned that those, I think he said, was it 34% of homes flipped in, I think it was Q1 of 2023 that you pointed out, was bought with financing. So keeping that in mind, why is speed so critical when it comes to offering the short-term loans for the fix and flip market?
Well, I mean, it's particularly interesting that, like you mentioned, within the fix and flip investment space, there is this conception that a lot of folks are cash buyers, but there's still a large portion that utilizes, almost a third that utilize financing still. But it really does come down to speed, especially as we're seeing demand for housing just because of, again, lack of inventory. Being able to provide financing quickly and also provide attractive financing is going to be the biggest thing that folks can provide to a fix and flip investor, because there are still those cash buyers. A cash offer can be extremely appealing to the seller, as well as, almost a done deal rather than having to deal with financing. So it comes down to speed and ease when it comes to actually financing these properties, and being appealing to that fix and flip investor. So that's something that brokers especially need to pay particular attention to, is the reputation of the lender they're working with, because truly a day or even a matter of hours waiting for financing to come through can be the difference between getting a deal or not at this point.
Yeah. And I think a big piece of it too is you talked about how the profit margins are a little bit more challenging than what they were in the past. So I would imagine offering fast financing opportunities for the person buying it to flip is important, as is when it comes time for them to sell it. Like we were talking about that double tap, being able to, I'm sure they're looking to get this thing fixed up and get off the book as quick as possible, where there are these skinny margins. So what advice would you give to originators looking to navigate the fix and flip? See, that's like Shelley with the seashells by the seashore thing. So you have to give me a little latitude on that one. But what advice would you give originators looking to navigate the fix and flip market and maximize their opportunities? Like, give me one or two things. Like, hey, make sure you do this. Like, what's a couple pieces of advice that we can give?
Absolutely. So one, definitely stay on top of the trends of what's happening, particularly identifying those markets where fix and flip activity is most prevalent and where there are the greatest opportunities, so that you can kind of strike while the iron's hot there. And also, like I mentioned, partnering with a trusted and respected lender within the fix and flip space is probably one of the best things you can do. Create that relationship sooner rather than later, just so you have that product offering. Particularly find a more diverse lender that can provide options for, first-time fix and flip investors, as well as the more seasoned folks. You really just want to be able to provide different options depending on, the investor client that you're ultimately looking to work with. But definitely, I would say sooner rather than later, just align yourself with a lender that has great reviews, that is renowned, that has a great understanding of the fix and flip space, and also a great understanding of how to work with these investors. That's the best thing you can do at this point in time.
Yeah. Any the question's kind of in my head is like, what's next? Is there any key trends or emerging shifts in the real estate sector that you think loan officers should keep an eye on in the coming years? Is there anything like on the horizon that you can think of to be looking out for? Or like maybe what's that old saying? I don't want to go to where the puck is. I want to go where the puck is going. So anything on the horizon that you see?
Yeah. So in the investment space, it was interesting. We actually did an internal market update today at my company. And one of the things that was identified as a real opportunity, particularly for investors, is single family home starts have actually dropped off again. So again, despite there being that lack of inventory, there is just doesn't seem to be as much movement as needed to be able to, rectify that problem. We're personally and anecdotally seeing a lot of requests for new construction. So it seems like the investor community is recognizing that, that is probably going to be the next place where they can jump in and hopefully provide housing and additional benefits for the real estate market. So I know fix and flip, like I mentioned, being able to renovate some of those older homes and turn them to get properties on the market is important, but new construction is trending up pretty significantly. Again, as I mentioned, just because of the lack of inventory continuing to be an issue.
And Erica, I know you work over at RCN Capital. Give me a little background of that. Like, who is that? I think most people know who you guys are, but just playing devil's advocate. Who are y'all? What do you guys specialize in, and how do y'all help the commercial loan officer?
Yeah, absolutely. So RCN Capital was founded in 2010. We're a direct nationwide lender catering specifically to real estate investors. We offer short-term fix and flip financing, long-term rental financing, as well as new construction financing. So a lot of the products and financing products that we talked about as opportunities for commercial originators and commercial brokers now. The investment space is all we deal in. And as I mentioned, just being able to partner with those originators to provide them with the products they need to be able to continue to expand their business and also be prepared to, operate within some of these industry trends is really what we strive to do.
Very good. And Erica, is there something I should have asked you today that I didn't? Did we cover it okay? Did I miss anything?
I think that really covered it all. I love talking about, the trends and where things are going and being able to try and pinpoint ways that, we can provide insight to your audience and to originators so that they can continue to thrive, especially as the market continues to be a little bit more turbulent. So I hope that was accomplished.
Yeah, I think we did. I certainly learned a lot by it. I thought it was fascinating. One thing that surprised me was the amount of homes that are involved in the fix and flip. Is there like a percentage number that comes at the top of your mind of, like, in the last couple of years, how many houses, what percentage of houses sold were in the fix and flip realm?
I believe it was the third quarter of last year, 9% of all homes had been flipped. So I know they consider within a 12-month period being purchased, renovated, and put back on the market. I know that is still lower than it was post-pandemic, particularly within that period of like 2021 and 2022, but that's still a substantial segment of the market. And we're actually seeing where there was a decline in flipping activity, things are starting to level out and starting to increase again. So it's showing really the opportunity that exists there. And while 9% may sound small, that is still a significant part of the housing market.
That's a huge number. I had no idea. I would have never have guessed it was that much of an impact, because you think 9% of the entire market, and then some 30+% of those were financed. Enormous opportunities here, and then I probably, for all practical purposes, 100% of the ones that were sold were financed, likely too. So just huge numbers here. So huge opportunity. So real good stuff. Hey, Erica, if somebody wants to reach out and get some more information about this, what's the best way for them to do that?
Definitely go to RCN Capital's website, rcncapital.com, or they can reach out to myself. Happy to field any questions at LaCentra at rcncapital.com, which is included in the article as well.
Very good. So be sure to go check that out in the article, again, with Erica LaCentra. And it was the article was called A Promising View. Very, 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 very interesting information. Much more of an opportunity than I would have thought prior to reading the article. Erica, thanks so much. Looking forward to reading the next one.
Thank you so much for having me, Carl. Really appreciate it.
Absolutely. Hey, for our listeners, thanks so much for letting us be part of your day. And the one thing that we ask is if you'd please leave a review. That helps us get the word out. And myself and our friends over here at the Scotsman Guide really appreciate you sharing this with your loan officer friends. So thanks again, and we'll see you on the next episode of Author Showcase. Thanks again, everybody. Bye-bye.